Guten Tag, APUSH. We have a new video today. It's the bee's knees by the big cheese himself, Mr. Linegar. Let's make history today as we jaw over Unit 6, Day 11. But first, let's do our daily punishment. Did you hear about the guy who got hit in the head with a can of soda? He was lucky it was only a soft drink. All right, your key terms for today are the Selective Training and Service Act, the Civilian Defense Committees, rationing, the WPA, the OPA, the Smith-Connolly Act, the NWLB, the FEPC, Rosie the Riveter, Braceros, CORE, Executive Order 9066, Komatsu v. U.S., Ex parte Endo, and the Zoot Suit riots. We're going to go over racial discrimination during World War II, the causes of World War II, and life during the Homefront of World War II. So let's get started. So just as a quick refresher, we as far as like what led to World War II, Japan, Italy, and Germany were the Axis powers. They did have a history of aggression. In 1905, Japan gets to 1905 to 1910, they get Korea. They get Manchuria in 1932. They invade the rest of China in 1937. They start going after the Pacific Islands in 1939. Italy goes after Ethiopia in 1935, Albania in 1935. Hitler is going to remilitarize the Rhineland in 1936. He gets Austria in 1938. He's going to get the Sudetenland in 1938. He invades the rest of Czechoslovakia in 38-39. And then he invades Poland in 1939, which starts the World War II. And by this time, they had already had the Tripartite Pact, which actually happened around 1936 between Japan, Italy, and Germany. America slowly, if you remember about this is stuff that we went over before, slowly got involved in the war. At first, FDR will issue the quarantine speech in 1937. It will be badly received. We have the Panay incident in 1937. They start to do the cash and carry in 1939. They're going to terminate their trade agreements with Japan and start trying to boycott them. They do the Destroyer Deal in 1940. By 1940, we do the Selective Training and Service Act. This is how we're going to start drafting Americans to fight. So this is the first time we ever do a peacetime draft. In 1940, we do the Post-Tripartite Pact. This is where we do a trade embargo on Japan, gasoline, scrap metal, and other essentials. We're also going to close the Panama Canal to Japan. In 41, we do the Lend-Lease Act. After Russia is attacked by the Nazis, we give money from the Lend-Lease Act to Communist Russia. We do a complete oil embargo of Japan by July 1941. And then in August 1941, they have the Atlantic Charter. And the U.S. Navy is given permission to attack U-boats in self-defense. So, let's talk about World War II. Life in the home front, life within the country. There will be a lot of propaganda used. A lot of this will be media cooperation. It's not going to be direct censorship, but everybody was super patriotic during this war. So like movie people, like movie actors, directors would work with the government. A lot of actors were drafted, and their job during the war was to like make little films and stuff, and to go to like the soldiers overseas and like perform for them. There's not direct censorship, but it is like, it's encouraged. Like the government is working hand in hand with the arts industry. You're going to see this in music, movies, and posters. There'll be bond drives, like World War I had Liberty bonds. World War II will also raise a lot of money through bonds. There will be some rationing in World War II. Unlike World War I, there will be rationing, which is one of the big differences. Also, we fight this war for 4 years. We only fought World War I for about 1 year. One of the things that's going to be created during World War II is the Civilian Defense Committees. Civilian Defense Committees were a federal agency that were set up to coordinate with state and federal measures for protection of citizens in case of war emergencies. What they would do is they would do, what do you do in case of blackouts, fire protection, childcare, health, housing, and transportation if like a city is bombed or something. So it's meant to coordinate with local agencies in case of danger for civilians and stuff. That's what civilian defense committees are. Oh, propaganda. This is the whole idea of rationing. A lot of this, some of the rationing was volunteerism. They would try to use patriotism to appeal to people. Of course I can. I'm patriotic as be. Any ration points won't worry me. So this is like saying, like, during World War II, you could try to buy stuff in the black market, but this is just encouraging people to be good patriotic Americans, which means do your rationing. These food stuff need to go overseas. All right. So during World War II, they're going to try to do full mobilization, total war, kick the economy into high gear. The government will take charges of some companies. The government is going to create the War Production Board, which is going to offer the businesses lucrative contracts. Also, large commercial farmers will also receive incentives. The War Productive Board will often direct companies. They'll tell companies, like, you are no longer making cars. You're now going to make tanks for us. They'll give them like quotas on what to make. They won't directly take over the companies, but they'll start to monitor and moderate them. It also ration commodities such as gasoline, oil, metals, rubber, paper to prevent them from becoming scarce. That's what the WPB decides on. So it really, the WPB is going to really deal with a lot of the economic aspects of the war. And unlike World War I, the World War II is going to be much less voluntaristic and more government controlled. And a good example of that is the OPA, the Office of Price Administration. America is going to be spending a lot of money in World War II, so we were afraid of inflation. So the OPA was given control by Congress to be able to freeze wages, prices, rents, and establish rationing. This was meant to stop inflation. There are going to be some laws to protect labor unions. The Smith-Connolly Act was actually passed in 1943 that says that labor unions cannot strike during World War II. It would be disloyal. So, like, labor unions would not strike during World War II. Another thing was created was the NWLB, the National War Labor Board. This is going to allow the government to arbitrate between businesses and labor unions. It was trying to prevent any conflict between businesses and labor unions during the war. They wanted everything to be as efficient as possible. So the NWLB was supposed to be an arbitration in relation to disputes between laborers and businesses. It will administer wage control in national industries such as automobiles, shipping, railways, airlines, telegraph lines, and mining. During this time, the government will raise taxes. In the Revenue Act of 1942, bonds will be sold, and the tax base will be increased. Look at this. He's fighting for the country, but they're working in the factories, so he's proud of his parents too. That's so cute. Okay. Not everything was good. Racially, in America, we were super hypocritical in a lot of aspects. FDR did pass the FEPC, the Fair Employment Practice Committee, which was passed by executive order. The reason FDR passed this in 1941 was the African-American civil rights leader at the time. His name was A. Philip Randolph, and he threatened to do a march on Washington, D.C. unless FDR got rid of segregation and discrimination for national governmental agencies. So the FEPC is going to get rid of discrimination for employees that work for the government. It doesn't get rid of segregation or discrimination for like a regular store, like a privately owned store, but it is supposed to get rid of it for governmental agencies. The FEPC will be strengthened by Executive Order 9346, which says all governmental contracts must have a non-discrimination clause. Along with that, another thing for African American civil rights is an organization will be formed called CORE, Committee on Racial Equality. CORE is going to see themselves as a very patriotic group for African Americans. They're founded in 1943. They have the Double V campaign. They want to have victory in Europe where they defeat the Nazi racists in Europe. And then they want to come back to America and defeat the racist in the South and get equal rights there. So, like, they're correlating, they're connecting, equality in Europe they want equality when they come back to America. And really, World War II is going to really begin the civil rights movement. You have all these veterans coming back after World War II that are no longer willing to sit back quietly. During World War II, 19 million women are going to be part of the workforce. 1/3 of the females. They will not be given equal pay, though. There is going to be a representation for this, and it's called Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter is a poster. It's an American working in a factory. It's showing that, you know, the woman at this time is patriotic. She's muscular. Look at those. Look at those. What are those called? Muscles. Those guns. That's what it's called. Look at those guns. God, she's awesome. But like, this is kind of another representation of the American woman. We had Republican motherhood. Then we had cult of domesticity. Then we had the Gibson girl. Then we had the flapper. And now we have Rosie the Riveter. Women are more independent. They're stronger. They're, you know, like, this is definitely a step up in the right direction for women. Although they still don't have equal rights. Don't get confused about that. One of the other things that's going to happen is with Mexicans. Hundreds of thousands of Mexican braceros are going to be allowed to cross the border to join the workforce. America is going to sign an agreement with Mexico. The agreement was between the U.S. government and the Mexican government, saying that Mexico would allow like a couple 100,000 Mexicans to cross the border legally. In return, America would use them in their fields because the Americans were fighting in World War II, and Mexico was neutral during World War II. That's the Bracero Program. After the war, some of them were became legal citizens, but we're still going to deport them. Some of the Mexicans we deport after World War II were actually U.S. citizens. It's pretty bad. One of the other pretty horrible things that America does during this time is the Zoot Suit riots. The Zoot Suit riots were between June 3rd to June 8th in Los Angeles, California. During this time, there was rationing of cloth. So there was rationing of cloth. So, like, you know, people wore clothing that were not baggy, that didn't have a lot of clothing. But one of the big kind of like trendy outfits during time were zoot suits. Zoot suits were suits, but they were really baggy suits. And this was something that a lot of Hispanics and really POCs wore, zoot suits. What's going to happen is on June 3rd, some American servicemen who are stationed in Los Angeles, they're going to see some Mexicans wearing zoot suits. They're going to be outraged. Why are you not rationing? You're wearing too much cloth. You beeping, beeping, beeping. Racist comment, racist comment, racist comment. They're going to strip the Mexicans from their clothing because they're not being patriotic. They're not rationing. And this is going to cause like 5 days of a race riot. It's going to go throughout the country, actually. White Anglos are going to strip children, teenagers, and youth who wore zoot suits because they were made of large amounts of fabric. This was they said they were being unpatriotic. Most of the violence will be directed at Mexican Americans, although there will be some African Americans and Filipino Americans that were also stripped during this time. But it's mostly Mexican Americans. Rosie the Riveter. This is the Bracero Program. And here's the Zoot Suit Riot. I can't even believe that. I can't believe what's wrong with this country sometimes. Okay. All right. During World War II, after America got involved in World War II, some Americans were afraid that the Japanese were unpatriotic and they would be disloyal and they would try to betray America. They thought Japanese Americans would. Japanese Americans had lived in this country since around the 1870s for the most part. They were loyal Americans. Just in case you didn't know, Japanese Americans got more medals of honor than any other race, like per person. They were super loyal and patriotic to this country. But some racist Americans, including Dr. Seuss, who supported what FDR did right here, and he made racist cartoons. I've been showing you Dr. Seuss cartoons a lot. Dr. Seuss hated Hitler because he was Jewish, but he was also low-key racist against Japanese people. He always did racial stereotypes in his cartoons. Bad times. But some people like Dr. Seuss and FDR thought the Japanese were disloyal. They thought they would try to betray the West Coast and open it up for an invasion. So we're going to start doing internment camps which are really concentration camps against Japanese people. The Japanese people will be basically arrested without trial. They'll be deported from their home. A lot of times their home will be foreclosed, and when they come back after the war, they'll have lost their home and all their life savings. They're going to be sent to 10 camps, detention centers. Most of these detention centers are going to be in like horrible places like Nevada, I think somewhere in Oklahoma, places like that. I actually got that a little wrong. The places they were going to be interned in were actually horrible places. I was right about that, but it was like California, Arizona. That's the place I was thinking about that was hot and horrible. Wyoming, Colorado. No offense if you're from Arizona and you're watching this video. Arizona rules. Colorado, Utah, and Arkansas. It's not going to be like a death camp like what the Nazis do. We're not going to be gassing the Japanese Americans, but it's pretty horrible. And one of the worst things about this is this was created in Executive Order 9066. This is an executive order that FDR passed. Some Japanese Americans will challenge this to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will rule in Korematsu v. United States that the president has the power to do this. So they will actually side with this horrible order right here. The one good thing, I guess, quote unquote, that the government does do, the Supreme Court rules in ex parte endo that if there's a patriotic Japanese citizen, like somebody that's fighting in the war, they cannot continue to detain them. So the ex parte endo kind of gets rid of Korematsu because there is no like justification for Korematsu. But like, you know, the damage is already done, honestly. It won't be until the 1970s that the U.S. government apologizes to the Japanese citizens. And okay, look, I don't want you to be like, oh, this is, you know, we're the worst. Like the Japanese people during World War II were doing the Bataan Death March, where they killed like thousands of American citizens. They did the Rape of Nanking, where like they would make a game of like, you know, finding pregnant Chinese women and spearing them and bayoneting them and raping them with their bayonets. So like what the U.S. did was not on the same level as that. But like as far as a Republican form of government goes with like rules of law, it's very disappointing. Here's Japanese internment. All right. During World War II, 350,000 women will join the military. They'll be like secretaries, receptionists, nurses. 1 million blacks will join the military. They will still fight in segregated units. 300,000 Latinos will join the army, despite the racism of things like the Zoot Suit riots. 225,000 Native Americans will join. Some of these Native Americans will be like code talkers, where they will use their Native American language for code, for talking in code when they're sending messages to different parts of the Pacific. 13,000 Chinese Americans will join, and 33,000 Japanese Americans will join the war, despite what the United States government did against them. All right, kiddos, that's all I have for you today. Until next time, deuces. Deuces, yeah.